So, who here remembers the heaping pile of shit that was Aliens Colonial Marines? I'm of course talking about Gearbox's game that launched all the way back in February 2013. To say that this game had problems would be an understatement. It suffered from dreadfully downgraded visual fidelity that nowhere near lived up to what was shown in early demos. It was a technical disaster with all the frame rate drops and lack of optimization. It was crawling with bugs and glitches, and its gameplay was just a mess, in no small part due to lackluster first-person shooter mechanics, uninspired level design, utterly brain-dead AI, and a measly 4 hours long campaign. This was a game that was 6 years in the making, and it didn't take a genius to recognize that those were 6 very troubled years. Now, perhaps even more infamous than the game itself is Gearbox president Randy Pitchford's repeated piss-poor attempts at defending the game. Anytime someone would criticize Aliens in any way, he'd ignore them, vilify them, deflect blame, or make these terrible, pathetic excuses. The guy just won't admit that Aliens was a bad game or that it had serious flaws, living in complete denial. And there are interviews out there where the interviewer seems baffled by the responses he gives when asked to address the game's failings. Just check out Eurogamer's interview article from 2015 titled An Hour with Randy Pitchford, or his September 2017 interview with IGN from the 23rd episode of their Unfiltered show. All you need to know about this man's ego are right there. Now, Aliens Colonial Marines is an old game, and the whole controversy is an old story, so why bring all this back up again, you ask? Well, a very interesting discovery has been made about the game that gives us even further insight into the kind of incompetency that went into it. One of the biggest sticking points of Colonial Marines was its utterly dreadful enemy AI. There is plenty of footage out there highlighting xenomorphs just running around like a bunch of zombies, like they haven't got the faintest clue about the nature of their existence. It's hilarious for sure, but it served as a fundamentally detrimental aspect of the infamous title. Well, turns out there is a good reason for why Colonial Marines' enemy AI was so bad. The following information comes from website ModDB, where one user going by the name of James Dickinson 963 posted about some rather interesting findings he made. It's worth noting that this post was published all the way back in October 2017, but it's largely remained in obscurity until people picked up on it recently, and it's making waves across the internet because it's so baffling. The user explains it best, so I'll just read to you what he found. Here's what he said. A typo found in the INI file after all this time appears to be one of the major causes for terrible AI mechanics in the game. Thankfully, the typo is easy to fix. Inside your game's config file, pekinengine.ini, is the following line of code. I'm sure you'll notice the spelling mistake. If you fix it to look like the above and then play the game, the difference is pretty crazy. Why is this line important? There are 2 reasons. 1. Attach Xeno to tether doesn't do anything, it's basically empty or stripped. 2. Attach pawn to tether does a lot. It controls tactical position adjustment, patrolling, and target zoning. When a Xeno is spawned, it is attached to a zone tether. This zone tells the Xeno what area is its fighting space and where different exits are. In combat, a Xeno will be forced to switch to a new tether, such as one behind you, so as to flank, or disperse so they aren't so grouped up, etc. Disclaimer, this is inferred opinion, I can't see the actual code, only bits. Whenever the game tried to do this, nothing happened. Now it does. So yeah, basically what we're looking at here is a 1-letter typo that completely broke the game's artificial intelligence. The difference is pretty stark too, judging by some footage that website PC Gamer recorded before and after the typo was corrected. Before the correction, you can see that the xenomorphs move pretty sluggishly and in dopey fashion, wandering around aimlessly instead of ferociously attacking the player as they should. But after the correction, the xenomorphs are clearly much more unrelenting in their attacks and pursuit against the player. Kotaku also shared some GIFs showing their results of before and after the typo was corrected. It's the exact same gameplay sequence, but in the before footage, the AI is all kinds of wonky, whereas in the after footage, the enemies feel significantly more dangerous. It's important to keep in mind, however, that this one typo isn't the magical solution to the game's myriad of problems, including where AI is concerned. Here's how PC Gamer put it: the change is less noticeable in some situations, and it's tough to say just from playing how much of the Xenomorph's clumsiness was caused by this typo, but they certainly seem to move more efficiently once it's corrected. They waste less time getting to the player, crawl and lunge more often, and generally move in more of a beeline rather than their usual drunken stroll. I mean, they're still plenty dopey, but hey, what did you expect? Kotaku also contributed their own opinions on their findings after their playtest, and they said this: I ran this mission several times in a row, completely exiting the game and altering the INI file between each attempt, and I cannot be sure that the difference in spelling is making a huge difference in the combat AI. While that alien shuffle seems to happen fairly often in the fixed AI, the leap, some wall crawling, and hiding behind boxes all occurred fairly regularly and randomly in both the original and fixed AI configurations. It's clear that changing the spelling in the INI file is doing something, but in my playthroughs of the first level, that something does not fundamentally correct all of the various problems with Colonial Marines. Aliens might hop around more, but they still do the zombie melee thing. They still clump up in a big anonymous horde to be mowed down with your rifle. It's still a clunky game with slightly more active aliens now. While this might be a massive improvement for later levels in the game, there is no moment in the game's opening level where this truly feels like the secret sauce that magically makes this game better than it was before. So, essentially, fixing the typo made a difference, but the underlying problems of Aliens Colonial Marines run far deeper than a mere typo in an INI file. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, puts the incompetency that went towards the game's development into clear perspective. The fact that they couldn't spot such a simple error, despite having spent 6 whole years working on this game. The utter indifference towards the fact that people would be spending their hard-earned money to experience a video game adaptation of a beloved franchise should tell you everything you need to know about why there is so little sympathy for the ridicule that this game and denialists like Randy Pitchford face. I know it's easy for the knee-jerk reaction to this latest development to be one of amusement, but let's not forget that Gearbox and Sega actually shipped the game in that state and charged full price for it, which is hardly laughing matter. Don't get me wrong, I'm well aware that debugging is one of the hardest and most painstaking aspects of game development. Hell, I've done some debugging myself back when I did a bit of programming for a class, and I remember racking my brains over a simple program where one typo screwed everything up. But Aliens being a game that they spent 6 years working on, Gearbox being a professional AAA game development studio, there is just no excuse for a mistake like this, and there is certainly no excuse for the other countless mistakes that contributed to Colonial Marines' dreadful quality. Now, I'd like to say that the past is the past, mistakes have been made, shit happens, and that we should now be looking towards the future. But I'm very concerned about the fact that the president of the game development company responsible for this disaster will not own up to any wrongdoing. I'm all for people making mistakes, learning from them, and then growing from that experience, but I have yet to hear Randy Pitchford admit even in the vaguest of terms that Aliens Colonial Marines is a genuinely bad game. I've only heard him trying to blame gamers for having expectations, making all sorts of bullshit excuses about why the game was near universally received so poorly, and implying that Aliens is a good game he's proud of. How can anyone place their trust in a studio whose leader is unwilling to progress from failures? Again, I know this is an old game, I know these are old shenanigans, but Aliens Colonial Marines keeps being brought up, and when it does, Randy goes into full denial mode even after all these years, and it's just frustrating. While the studio's official Twitter page did catch on to the story and were willing to poke fun at themselves for it, that's well and all, but it doesn't change the fact that the game shipped the way it did, and the fact that if the captain can't recognize his own blunders, then the whole ship and the journey ahead is compromised. That's what I think anyway. All that aside though, this is an eyebrow-raising little story about how one measly computer code character can utterly cripple a key aspect of a video game, and a cautionary tale for programmers about the importance of debugging your software, particularly when the bugs turn out to be game-breaking. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content and would like to support this channel directly, consider donating on Patreon. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out!